suppose one thing that I do remember was actually the first sale. And my co-founder rang me up. He's like, somebody's just made a sale. I was like, are you serious? Do we know them? No. Wow. So it's somebody that has found us and made a sale. This is a great. Are you sure it's not your mom? No. Great. Okay. So I can remember that moment really vividly, because it's all of the consumer moments that give me the most joy, because they're the validation of this will work for the consumer. So therefore there's a business there. You can get investment doesn't mean your business is going to work. You can get investment doesn't mean your business is going to work.
Hello, today we have Deirdre McGettrick. She is the founder of the UK's #1 furniture search and discovery platform, ufurnish.com. They bring together over 1 million products from more than 100 furniture retailers, including John Lewis, Wayfair, Dunelm, Benson's for Beds, SLF24 and Indusville. Prior to founding ufurnish.com, Deirdre spent a decade working in leveraged finance, issuing bonds for companies including Ocado and Siva Logistics. Welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
No worries. Well, this podcast is for people who are looking to raise, and that's why you're on, because you've raised a significant amount of money, and we want to hear that story and especially all the trials and tribulations you had to go through, and hopefully listeners of this podcast will learn a lot from you. So I want to sort of take you back to maybe before the raise and just sort of coming out of kind of your full-time work into deciding to start the business. How did that whole process come about, and what was the decision for doing that?
Yeah, so in terms of my journey, I never really set out to start a company. That wasn't really part of the plan. I was working in investment banking, and I liked my job. It was really diverse. So you were learning lots about interesting companies like Ocado and all the work they're doing. So, you might spend 3 months with them leading up to issuing a bond, especially when they are an inaugural or first-time issuer. And I always thought I'd sort of move actually into one of the companies or into one of the corporates that were some of our clients, and that I would work my way up to be maybe a CFO or a CEO one day. So what happened to interrupt that journey? Well, I bought an apartment, and I suppose if I step back a little bit, I've loved interior design since I was a little kid. So I would be getting the property section of the paper and cutting out properties that I liked, cutting up the Argus catalogue, doing my room designs. And that was really the excitement of when I bought the apartment, thinking, oh my God, finally, I have a project where I can buy my own interiors and furnishings. So I was very excited, and I had lots of inspiration. I was very prepared. I had a year's worth of pictures taken in hotels and restaurants. I had a shoebox full of paper cuttings from the Metro and the Evening Standard on the tube. And I pretty much knew what I wanted to do in the 3 months where it goes into the black hole of the legal joys. I just needed to make it happen. I just needed to make the purchases. I knew what I wanted. But frustration struck. I couldn't find the items. And I was going retailer after retailer after retailer. And you look like you have a nice sort of mustard velvet chair there in the background.
Yeah.
If it was something like that I decided I wanted to have, where do I go out and find it? I know it exists because David has it in his room. So somebody definitely makes it. Where can I find that? And then I was going retailer after retailer thinking, well, there must be a better way to search for furniture. Why isn't there one place that you can search the entire market on, one website, all the retailers, all the products? And really very similar to Rightmove and how I actually searched for my property in the first place. I went on there to see all of the apartments that were for sale within my budget and specifications, and then sort of decided to reach out to the estate agents based on the property, rather than necessarily just looking at each individual estate agent on that side. So it was sort of deciding, right, there's a better way out there. This is a frustrating search process. Let's create it.
Yeah, interesting. So you turned your passion into and a frustration for a passion for furniture and interior design and into a business. That was like the fuel for it. But the main inspiration moment came from not being able to get what you wanted. So that's a very good, very good way to sort of start. You saw the problem and wanted to offer a solution.
My own problem.
Yeah. So how did it go? Early days of setting up the business. What was the first steps you took?
So the first step is actually doing some research. So this is a problem for me. Is it a wider problem? Am I a bit of a banking nerd and I love an Excel spreadsheet and I've copied and pasted URLs and links, but maybe I'm a bit anal and not everybody searches like this. Maybe it's not a solution that everybody needs. So first off was going out and actually talking to people who were renovating, talking to people who were buying furniture for their homes and figuring out a bit about their consumer journey. How are they doing it? Are they frustrated? Would something like this help them? So that was sort of step one, validate the idea to see if it actually will help many people. So what would the scalable business model be there en masse? And then from there, it was really about, right, how do you actually go and make this happen? And that was a whole new skill set that you're learning, right? From how do I register a company on Companies House? What do I need to do? And then how do you actually build out the technology? Where do websites come from? So right at the beginning, how do you actually go out and try and speak to a retailer to get them to come on board? So it was really all those basic skills at a very basic level that you have to start off, because you're very experienced in your niche and in the area you've been working in. But it's like figuring out how all these other business areas and all the jobs of your friends that you sort of vaguely knew. She does marketing, but question mark, what does she do? I never know. And I've been housemates with her for 5 years. All of a sudden I'm like, okay, tell me exactly what you do, because I need to learn everything about marketing and how it actually works. So you're really learning how the whole world nearly fits together so that you can build up all the skill sets that you need. So that's a pretty, additive process that you're sort of going on and learning. And it's what's the next step that you need from, first off setting up a company to then thinking, right, how am I going to build this out as a technology concept? What is all the different things I need to learn to begin to have enough information to make decisions there?
Did anyone help you as a mentor early on, or was it just purely your own research?
Oh gosh, there was so many conversations. There is a book I read. I don't read too many books, but one that I've read is Sheryl Sandberg, and it's called Lean In.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always struck by one of the stories that she told. So she was doing a summer internship or a work program in the US Treasury under Timothy Geithner. And there was herself and a few others, and he'd set them a task. And he would say, go off and find the answer to this and come back in 2 days with the answer. So sure, and lo and behold, 2 days later, everybody came back in with all of their research. Cheryl was always back into him that same afternoon with the answer. She didn't go off and figure it all out herself. She went off and spoke to people that gave her the answer by speaking to 3 or 4 people and forming a view much quicker than if you had to go and do it yourself. So I am a huge supporter of asking questions, of talking to people that are more knowledgeable than you. And each conversation that you have, you sort of layer up and you get a little bit more information so that then you begin to know actually what you need to understand in that area. So loads of people, I'm never that good on terminology, whether somebody's a mentor or coach or what they are, they're all helpers. And I have a lot of helpers, and I used a lot of helpers to just understand and to build that knowledge from the get-go.
Yeah, brilliant. So tell us about that first year then. So you had no experience of building websites, and yet you've developed this massive brand, which is an online brand. But so what how did it develop over sort of a 12-month period, that sort of year one? What did that look like?
Yeah, well, the first thing that I did is I actually got a co-founder. So that co-founder was somebody who'd worked in a startup. He was employee 5, it had grown to 500 employees, that had been on the journey, that had actually understood a lot of this. So he had a very complementary but different skill set to me, which meant that we could sort of divide and conquer the business and use our skills in the right places to actually build the business. So that was very much the approach that we took. So he was stronger on the technology side. He looked at that, understanding how we would actually build out the technology. And yeah, it was very much around how can you, as a single person who has come from a very specific and niche industry, how do you get your broader skill set? And I think that's where a co-founder can be really, really valuable.
And presuming in that first 12 months or so, you were funding it yourself, could you sort of let people know roughly what you would have put in as your own capital to this? Because it must have cost quite a bit to get some of this stuff set up, right?
Yeah, it did. So we completely self-funded in the first year. And with that, we went out and we built an MVP. So a minimal viable product
Mm-hmm.
part of the website, to be able to show people this is the vision, this is what we want to do. Here it is in a beta form. It's not perfect, but this is what we will actually build a scalable version of the platform by going out and raising funds and then doing that. So we invested in all of that upfront. And then as well, that enabled us to go out to the retailers to say, this is what it looks like. Can we bring you on board? Because there's a little bit of a chicken and egg with it, where you need retailers and their products to actually give you the supply. So you can have a tech platform, but if you have no retailers, you've got nothing to put on there. So building that out was really important to actually get retailers onboarded, and then to be able to have a demo product that you could, number one, show to users. Again, user testing, really important. We had those early conversations. Now let's go back and sort of say, right, here's a concept, have a play around with it. Does this help? Where would you like it to see it improved, or where would you like to see it changed? And then taking that concept and that proof points to investors to say, this is the vision, here's the research and the validation that we've done. Now we need your help to build this into a scalable version of a business.
Okay, that's interesting. So was that your journey for year one then? Get the MVP, get the website launched, get all the validation, but you're not actually trading at that point, or were you trading?
No, we weren't really trading. So, you've got to invest in marketing to drive people to your proposition. You can build the best product in the world, but if nobody knows about it, you're not going to have a business. So it was really about the build and the background over the first year.
But you actually went to investors in that first year, at the end of that first year?
At the end of the first year, we went out to investors and then showed them what we had built. I think it depends on the business that you're building, probably there, David, as well. So, if there's something out in market that's very similar, I'm going to be a food delivery company. Well, everybody knows Getir and Deliveroo. So you probably don't need a demo of that to show them, because they can already use their imagination to sort of get there. Versus we were creating a new category of searching furniture. So we actually needed to sort of build a demo to be able to explain people and to show how this really solves a problem.
Okay, so let's talk about, this is kind of the meat of the podcast, really, like that how did you attract investors? What did you have to prepare, and how did that process look like after that 12-month period? You got the demo, you got the everything, you know that you need investment to take it forward. What was the first thing you did in your preparation for investment in terms of materials and like maybe building a list of investors, or how did that look?
Yeah. Gosh, I'm trying to remember what came first, but we needed a pitch deck. So we needed something to be able to go out and to show them what it was, whether it's including screenshots of it, all of the explanations. But it's funny because we didn't really use necessarily the pitch deck in meetings, turning pages on slide 1, on slide 2. So it's really about, that age-old adage around, what is the problem? What is the solution? How big is the market? Why are you and your team the right people to solve it? What have you already achieved, and what are you going to achieve? That's basically it. Like, of any basic pitch, it's really solving and answering those questions. So that's what the slides covered in that element. As I said, we didn't necessarily use them all that heavily, but mainly as well, that could be, I would say, as a result of the fact of the people who we approached. It was people that were in our network. It was people who knew us. So I had come from investment banking. Those people tend to earn quite decent money. They've got disposable income. They're interested in tax efficient incentives like EIS. So it was going out to actually previous colleagues that I had worked with at the beginning. So it tended to be more of a conversation in that way around explaining what the concept was. And I think a really important point around how I was able to do it as well is that I'd worked with all these people. So it removed any question around, you're starting off, you're a really hard worker, you get stuff done, you will go for, 24 hours, you will not give up, you are resilient, you will keep fighting, you've got energy. So that was already answered for them. And I think that's a big part of when you're investing in a business in the early stages. A lot of people say it, oh, we invest in the person. Do you though? But that's where I suppose all of the people that knew me really were probably investing in the person.
Yeah. So let's recap then. These sort of pointers for success for you were having a really amazing passion, identifying the problem, doing lots of research to validate that problem, building the MVP, the demo, so that you can see and feel it and understand what it is, and then utilizing a network of people that you already knew. Right? Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So let's talk about that then. So you're saying that most of your pitches were done because they're personal pitches, that I guess the emphasis wasn't so much on the deck. It was more like they want to just sort of have something to hold and you know, understand it. But you're mainly pitching in person. Is that what you were doing?
Yeah, ideally. I love meeting people in person, and wherever I could, I would always go meet them in person. So it's not a Zoom call or anything like that. And it's just talking them through the concept. And I suppose if you meet in person as well, you can really look the person in the eye. You can have a much better conversation. I find like with Zooms, I don't know about you, David, but when you jump on a Zoom, it's like pretty straight into the business, is where you miss that moment of walking from the lift to the office and the office to the lift, and would you like a coffee, and you're chatting, what was your weekend, what did you do? So you begin to get to know people as people. And I suppose that's the bit I think that is really important as well, because at the end of the day, most of us do buy things from people that we like, from people that we feel connected to. So by doing things over Zoom, I think you lose those points of actually relationship building on either end of the meeting. That's really, really important.
Yeah, that is true. And I do a lot of Zooms as we all do, and I try and allocate a few, 30 seconds a minute for just general chit chat. I know that, and the Swiss, well, I remember the Wolf of Wall Street was like, oh no, our tradition is we have to have 5 minutes of chit chat. So that's quite a good way of doing it, I think.
Yeah.
But okay, so was there any investors that you had to reach out to that were outside the network, that were colder?
Yes.
Right.
So that is sort of twofold.
Yeah.
So one is cold reach outs on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
That can work surprisingly well, I found. You've got to be pretty concise message to the point when you're sending it, because you've got a certain number of characters to really get your point across and get them to connect, and then that you can follow up with a little bit more information if that's what's required. But number two, then it was like, who are people that I believe would get what I'm building? Who are people that have got experience in it? Who are people that could add value? How do I get those people? And then that's also looking up, not necessarily just a cold reach out, but how do you use the power of that warm introduction? So who is the middle person that could connect me into this investor who I believe could be additive in a much broader sense of the space? So again, going back to Sheryl Sandberg, I can consistently go to them and ask them questions and, knock into all of that wisdom that they've created over their career, and they're incentivized to help me because they've invested. So I was very keen to build up investors who I could lean on in a much broader way than just getting their money.
So you were looking to connect to the connectors, if that's right.
Yeah. How do you get a warm introduction to some of these people? Because they're very successful. I've got 5 people on my cap table that have built a business that is listed, or they have sold for over £1 billion.
Wow, yeah.
Those people are busy. They get a lot of reach outs. How do I cut through the noise? So sometimes you need a little bit of help. I can say, David, I know you know X really, really well. Would you ever introduce me? And of course, X likes the fact that you've introduced me, because like, well, David wouldn't waste my time because he knows how busy I am. So if he thinks she's relevant of me having a conversation, I'll take that conversation. Versus how do they actually qualify all of their conversations? So getting that introduction can be really, really important, but that requires a lot of research. Everything is about research and prep. How do you actually find the people, and how do you find the connector that can get you into that person? That can be a long, drawn out process as well. It's not going to happen overnight. I'd be reaching out like, David, have you made the introduction? David, you said you'd make it yesterday. Did you make it? We have to come back. You've got to leave enough time that David's busy too. It's going to take him a while to reach out to Mr. X, and Mr. X is on holidays. So there again, it's going to take another 2 weeks before he comes back to David. And then we set up a call, and then the call has to get rescheduled, because if something crops up in their diary, you're not going to be the thing that's going to survive in it. We can push that to next week. So, you've got to build in timeframes and processes around all of these. So having nearly a bit of a CRM around who you're going after, when did you last chase, when should I next chase David to give him a reminder? You've got to approach it in that way was very much how I structured it.
Yeah, and that a lot of people don't realize that process is very similar to how you would reach out to clients, right? I mean, you didn't know about marketing before doing the business, but did you see parallels in what you were doing in your general marketing to what you were doing with the investor outreach?
Yeah, 100%. And you can do it for anything. Whether it's trying to get a piece of coverage by PR. How do you reach out and connect with that journalist who you think, my God, these are the most aligned person? If I could get them to write about, the concept and the business, wouldn't that be fantastic? How do you get connected into them? You can apply that same logic to so many things.
So tell us about your research process with the in-between person. How do you know who's connected to who?
So LinkedIn is really helpful because it shows you have 3 connections in common. So going in, looking at those 3 connections, who's the warmest? Who do I think will actually know them? Do I even know my 3 connections? Sometimes you don't know everyone on LinkedIn. So that was all part of the process. And then it was like, right, who of those 3 people is the most relevant introduction to introduce me? And how long do I give that person until I decide, right, they're not getting the job done. Maybe I need to go to the second person that I'm mutually friends with on that side. So research like that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really big theme I've seen with you're working really, really hard on researching. So you're turning cold contacts into warm ones, or trying to find someone that is that warm connection.
Yeah,
that's a really good tip for anyone listening. So take note of that one. So
and particularly what I think is really important is look at who has ran or exited or been involved in an early stage in a business that you admire. If I say I want to be the Rightmove of furniture, well, do I know anybody at Rightmove? Can I get into that team? Which other businesses do I think have similarities? Is it like, oh, Skyscanner? They've built a really interesting business. How can I learn from them? Who are the people that were there on that journey? Whether they're still there, or whether they moved on, is it competitive or not? So if it's competitive and they're still there, no point reaching out to them, is there? However, if it's a similar concept in a different industry, or it's somebody that was there 5 years ago, but they've since left, those are types of people as well that you can actually apply that logic to say, oh, wouldn't they be great? Because they'll still know a lot of knowledge and they'll get my business model. Those are the types of people that you might go after.
So with all the outreach that you did, how did you how did it come about that the match was right? I mean, was the investors, was it kind of more from your side that, you identified these investors, you just went after them, or was it more sort of a broader outreach? And then when you had a few interested parties, then you could kind of pick and choose. Tell us about that sort of selection process from both sides.
Yeah, look, I think it becomes quite apparent pretty quickly whether there's interest on both sides. And people won't invest in something that they don't understand, or they won't invest in people that they don't like. So if they like you and they get the business, that's the first sort of test and hurdle. And then, from there, it's really right. Are they interested in investing? Do they have available liquidity at that time? Sometimes they don't. That's fine. Could they still help you? Maybe they're willing to help you because they like the concept and they like the idea and they like your energy. So how do you then sort of maintain that relationship? How do you, maybe come back later on as well? I've had investors that said no to me, but yet 12 months later, they said yes. So they wanted to follow the journey a little bit. They wanted to see if we were capable of doing what we were saying. So there's things like that as well. And I always think it's about relationship building ultimately. So how do you begin to build relationships, even if it's not for right now? Who's right for 12 months, for 24 months? Who's right for 5 years ahead? And how can I just begin to sort of get on their radar, say, build it friendly? It's always nicer to build relationships when you don't necessarily have an ask.
Yeah.
That way they follow the journey, they see the traction, you catch up, you're sort of slowly getting the buy-in.
Yeah, that's a great tip, because investors, I always say to our clients, like, investors have all the time in the world. They don't have to invest now, they could invest later. but you can use that to your advantage. You can keep them posted, especially with big wins in the company. Tell us about the timeline. So you did about 12 months, and then you started the investor outreach. What was like the timeline between you starting the outreach and then some of the first money actually coming in?
Yeah, so it was January 2020, when we sort of closed our first tranche of investment. We'd probably been having conversations since around the September of the year before, so for about 4 months in terms of bringing that together. And we did a sort of a first close, and then from there we were having conversations with other people. So we didn't want to wait until we sort of closed out every conversation. So we were like, right, we've got what we want, let's take this, but let's continue to have conversations. And then once it was closed, we actually were able to bring in quite a lot more investors who had been sort of talking to, but that sort of created that initiative and that timeline to say, actually, yeah, no, we are in and we're coming in right now. So it was about 4 months though, from sort of initial conversations through to when we took our first money.
And would you like to reveal what that first investment amount was?
So that amount, including the bit that came in sort of in the next 2 to 3 months with other conversations that we were closing off, depends upon when you first start speaking to somebody, that was 1.8 million.
So a significant amount. And did you target that amount, or was that kind of over what you were thinking to raise?
So that was over what we were thinking to raise, but I think very much when you listen to a lot of people, it's going to take more money, it's going to take longer than you think. Yep. So always take more money if you can. So that was very much the approach that we took.
And how did you start to allocate that amount of money into the business, and how did it sort of come in? I'm guessing it didn't all come in at once, right?
No, it pretty much did come in at once. We were like, okay, we're going to close. This is the terms. We've got the lawyers. Everybody was there. So sent out, subscription agreements to people saying, right, sign and transfer your money by Friday. I think it was a Friday. You should never do it on a Friday though. It's always a bad day to do things. So people are sort of busier and getting ready for the weekend. So do it on a Thursday or like a Wednesday instead. But yeah, and then we just were literally there refreshing the bank account all the day long. So we said, oh, this is in, this is in, this is in. Got another signed doc back. Let me go back into the bank account and see if that's money has arrived. So it was a really exciting day.
Yeah, I bet. And just prior to that, let's go back a little bit and talk about the due diligence process, because with yours, being kind of you had some traction, but you maybe didn't have that much in terms of sales. Is that right? And how did you go through that whole due diligence process? Was it kind of a lot of due diligence into you personally, or like just talk about what sort of things you had to show to the investors?
Yeah, so we were pre-revenue at the time, so it wasn't into revenue. So what the investors were looking at is actually, what's all your contracts? Do you have employment contracts? Do you own the IP? What are the terms and conditions across your commerciality? Can you show me the industry document which confirms the size of the industry? Can you show me the retailers that you're going to be targeting? So it's just sort of showing, I suppose, the proof points along the way, and that you've got, the company set up, that you've incorporated in the right way, all of those legal sort of documents, having those sort of to hand in a data room, or having them someplace that you can share them across and that people can go in and see and have a look. They'll want access to your model. So here's the projections for the business. This is how we've built them up. This is the assumptions behind all of the elements that we've put into the model. This is all of our costs. This is, the headcount that we look at. This is a project that we're going to build, and this is how much it's going to cost. So they're looking at all of that element, I suppose, to sort of due diligence it to see, are these costs realistic? What happens if they were more? What happens if revenues were less? What happens if revenues were more? So they're doing scenarios based on your model to show, right, this is plan B if we put it in the middle, but there's a plan A where you over exceed, there's a plan C where you underestimate your costs and they're going to be more. What does that mean on the edges, and where have you got flexibility within your model as well to say, do you know what, something cost us more than we thought, but we can take this element out. So where's your fixed versus your variable costs within the business? That was a big one as well, to understand with your runway where you're going to be going to.
And with all that data, is that stuff that you put together with your co-founder, or did you have other expert help to help you with those figures and all that information?
No, we built all that together as part of the business. Having said that, that's my background, building models. So
right.
I've built out.
So you didn't need any external help.
Investment memorandums, investment pitches, models. That was my whole background. So yeah, we did it all internally.
Okay, so you're already speaking the language of the investors, which would have helped.
Yeah. Although it's different. So trying to sell a bond for Ocado versus that's a fund manager, it's their job. Okay, they're investing money on behalf of you and me and our pension who might be with Aviva. And then I'm going to somebody and saying, hey, will you put your hand in your pocket and give me, a tenner out of money that you've worked hard for and earned? It's a different conversation.
Yeah, totally. Okay. So is there anything now that the money's coming in, is there anything sort of in hindsight that you wish you knew before starting the raise?
Gosh, that's a good question.
Was there anything unexpected that you weren't prepared for when investors were talking to you?
No. I'm just trying to think in terms of, there's nothing coming to my head straight off. I suppose bits of advice that I give to people is that time kills deals. I think that's a sales saying. So if you get somebody the first week in September, it's a long time until you're getting back in touch with them to say, hey, by the way, we've now got all of the commitments that we needed and we're ready to close our round and we're going to do it the first week in January. So it's probably an element of structuring and keeping in touch with those people as well so that they don't go cold on you. And maybe there's elements, I always say to people, it's better to have some money in than waiting for it all as well. So you might want to look at how do you structure up your round. I'm not saying I would do this next time, but I think it's definitely helpful for some people to say, right, well, I'm raising 300,000 and I've already got 100,000 of it actually banked. So committed and banked, not if there's a commitment over here, which, commitment could go away. And even how do you create a bit of momentum to drive that initial, as you said, investors are in no rush to deploy. So how do you create a reason to be momentum? Because the more time you spend fundraising, the less time you're spending working on the business. So it could be, by the way, the first 100,000 of this 300,000 raise, we're going to give a 5% discount to. So how do you create that momentum at the beginning? Because it's much easier to actually get the second 100,000 and the third 100,000. We're raising 300,000, we're 66% complete, we're looking for the last 100,000. That's a different conversation of we're looking to raise 300,000 and we've raised nothing.
How many investors in total put in for that initial raise, that 1.8?
I think we had about 25.
Oh, right. And kind of what was the story behind the very first one?
I don't actually know who the very first one was anymore. I can't remember what the first conversation was. I can't remember. Oh my God, this is our first 100K in. Like we had this spreadsheet and it was like, right, they've indicated this amount and this amount and this amount. And then you'd go back and you'd actually reconfirm. And some of them might be like, yeah, I'm sticking with that amount. Others were like, oh, actually, I want to put in a bit more. Others are like, oh, actually, I don't have as much cash flow. My bonus wasn't that high, so I'm going to put in a little bit less. So we had a little bit of variance around where they first, or they might come in and say, oh, I'll invest between 50 to 100K. So you have to go back and actually confirm what the amount is and all of that element there. But yeah, like the initial backers are the people that knew us best. And then you could sort of go out and say, right, well, we've already got 500K committed as part of this round. We're looking for the next 500K in order to bring it to completion, and sort of worked it like that. But yeah, that's an interesting one. I can't remember. Yeah, you think you'll never forget these things when you're there at the moment.
Right.
I always reflect as like someone says, what's the most challenging thing? I was like, the most challenging thing is always the thing I'm doing today because it's the thing I haven't achieved. Once you've achieved it, it's in the past. But yeah, that's actually very interesting. Don't remember.
I was mainly thinking like if there was one kind of lead investor which strategically knew a lot about this space, a lot about online retail or e-commerce and that sort of thing, or this industry that you're going into, I was kind of assuming that maybe there was someone like that that came in, and that gave a lot of other investors confidence, but that wasn't the case, right? It was a lot of individuals.
We did have people like that, but they weren't the
Right.
first investors.
Okay. So after those more strategic people came in, was it a lot easier to sort of talk about those, and then to get a bit of kind of this sort of FOMO factor or like urgency factor to get others in?
Yeah, definitely. So once you've got a name of somebody who's been very successful, and I would say always ask for their consent. Don't assume that you can say it.
Right.
Some of these people are very private, but ask, oh, are you happy for me to say that you are an investor when I'm speaking to other investors? And then if they say yes, then to be able to say, well, so and so has invested and they're obviously very successful and they believe in us, etc., etc. That can be really helpful. Yeah.
Okay. So let's have a think about, because you're 3 years in now. If you got that, you sort of started in 2020 in the first year. So 2021, you got this amount of money in. Tell us about the second year then. How did you deploy the money, and what changed? I mean, this is you starting the business, full steam ahead, right? So it's what happened in that second year, in the sort of 2021 period?
Yeah, so that was all about, right, we've built an MVP, we've used agencies and consultants and contractors, but now we actually have the resource to be able to bring people into the team permanently. So we went out and we hired people. Now that's a long process. That took us 3-4 months to actually find the right people. And when you're hiring roles for the first time as well, you don't always get it right. So that takes an awful lot of time to actually get the right people on the bus alongside you. And then once you've got them on the bus, then it's around, right, what is the focus? What is their specific role? And how do you do one step at a time to make the bus go faster, is very much the approach that we took. Times we tried to speed it up too quick and do too much. And that's where sort of it begins to fall over a little bit. So you need to keep it focused on the one next thing that will make the biggest impact. There's so much opportunity. There's so much excitement in an early stage company. And I think the definition of startup that I like is it's a state of uncertainty in which you're trying to establish if there is a business that is commercially viable. So you're looking at all different things, but you can be very easily distracted. You can be doing things to explore left, right, and center. So how do you become quite strict on yourself? Because you can have lots of conversations with lots of people and lots of different elements, but it's about keeping it sort of more focused around what's really going to make the difference, is where you need to concentrate.
Yeah, right. And did you get any support or advice or help from some of the investors that put in, or was it pretty much just you going for it yourselves?
No, we got massive advice. We would ask for introductions into their network if they knew anybody that was looking for new roles in areas that we were hiring. We would lean on that. Where some of them were experts in certain areas, I got them to help me with interviews. So they might come in and do a final check interview or an interview along the way. They would help with, reviewing job descriptions. If we wanted to check commercials, they've got businesses as this typical commercials for working with recruiters, as an example. So we checked a lot of things with them. We really used, their knowledge to help us to sort of shortcut and to try and make sure as well, I suppose, that we didn't make a mistake and you think, well, we didn't know.
And yeah, absolutely. And in that second year, I'm guessing you're building the infrastructure, you're hiring, you're building the website platform, which I guess would have been a massive cost as well. Yeah. Was your runway accurate? Did you find that you overspent on certain things? I mean, how did the spending go compared to your projections and compared to your models? How accurately did it follow?
Yeah, I think we were actually very accurate. But in terms of how I built out the model, it wasn't top down, it was bottom up. So it was understanding, this is the salary that we're going to have. These are all the equipments that we're going to use. These are all the software licenses. This is this project that we need to work with the consultancy on and how much that was going to be. So I had researched a lot in advance to actually understand how we were going to spend the money and who our partners were. So, what we didn't want to do was raise money and then spend time figuring out how we were going to spend it.
Yeah.
We did all that pre-raising the money to show this is the money that we want to raise. This is how we're going to deploy it. We're going to hire these people. We're going to start this project with a consultancy, and we're going to spend this money on marketing to drive acquisition. And then you sort of had already researched how much those were going to be.
Mm-hmm. So, and I'm guessing that the investors loved that as well, if your models were extremely accurate and very well set out from the start.
Yeah, I think it gives a lot of confidence around how this business can plan. And when they say they're going to do something, they've actually done it and delivered on it. So that gives a lot of confidence to what I'm seeing in the future. And that all sounds great, but that's bloody unrealistic, isn't it? Well, actually, no, you don't have that with us, because actually we've proven in the past that we can accurately forecast.
So what did the end of year 2 look like? What sort of state was the business in then?
So at the end of year 2, we had our team fully in place. We had the technology built in-house. So our MVP at that point was sadly laid to rest because it was functional but not scalable. And we had onboarded quite a lot of retailers as well. So we were really growing from that stage. We were beginning to get the foundational pillars, I suppose, of the business in place.
What did your revenue look like at the end of year 2? Were you in profit?
No, we were not in profit, but we were making revenues as we had sort of planned. So I think that was really encouraging in terms of, yes, there is a commercially viable business model here. And for a company like ours, we actually were very transparent with the investors as well.
Yep.
We will not be profitable in 12 months or 24 months. We have to build out a full technology platform. We have to onboard all of the furniture retailers. We have to drive acquisition of users. So this is not a business that is going to be immediately profitable. It's a business that, you know, will thrive on economies of scale when it is a big, big beast.
So now in 2023, what does the beast look like? Is it on its feet? Is it ready to tear down the world, or how does it look at the moment?
Yeah, no, it's I think this is where it all actually gets exciting, because you've got a very established business now. You've got a technology platform that is completely unique in market, that drives a consumer experience that consumers cannot get anyplace. And you hear that coming back from consumers, and that's really, really energizing. You know, when you've got people coming to you or sending you a message saying, oh my God, I used this for the first time last night and it's amazing. And you're like, I know, isn't it? That's great. Like, to hear that coming back, that is the nicest feeling in the world. There is nothing better than that. I suppose one thing that I do remember was actually the first sale. I might not remember who the first investor was, but the first sale. And my co-founder rang me up. He's like, somebody's just made a sale. I was like, are you serious? Do we know them? No. Wow. So it's somebody that like has found us and made a sale. This is a great. Are you sure it's not your mom? No, great. Okay. So like I can remember that moment really vividly, because it's all of the consumer moments that give me the most joy, because they're the validation of this will work for the consumer. So therefore there's a business there. You can get investment, doesn't mean your business is going to work.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was very much that's the exciting bit, really, is where you get that customer feedback and that joy and that energy from them. And that's the items that you can share back as well with the team internally. It's really energizing.
Yes, it is. I think as everyone listening to this is going to be most likely a business owner themselves, I think we all remember our first sales. It is a special moment. So I totally understand that. So what does the future look like now then? Are you going to raise again in the future, or I think you're going to be on a path where you don't need to?
We will look to continue to scale, and there will likely be investment rounds in the future for ufurnish.com. So what we're really about is how do we continue to build that brand awareness across the whole of the UK. So when we get that feedback from consumers, that's amazing, but there's a lot of people out there that still haven't heard of us. So we're very focused on growing that brand awareness so that we can bring the solution to everybody across the UK who might be looking for furniture or furnishings, and being able to say, hey, there's a whole new way to search. Whatever you're looking for, your mustard velvet chair, come on and I'll show you all the options across the market. You can favorite them, you can set sales alerts, and then once you're ready to buy, you can click out to the retailer and buy. But that's the messaging that we're getting out to the masses.
Yeah, and keep doing it. I mean, I now I wasn't aware of it. When I bought this place, I was like, you know, I would have loved to had that sort of service. You know, it was all, I was going all over the place for shopping for furniture. So yeah, awesome.
It's
Well,
exactly the feedback that we always get. If only I'd
yeah.
known about you guys.
So now you've got success in the market and you've got validation. What about, are there any threats from sort of copycats? I mean, that's what tends to happen when you're the sort of pioneer. You know, you're out there, you do something amazing, and then you find, oh, that business looks remarkably similar, or that business looks remarkably similar. Has that come about or not?
Everybody has competitors out there in different forms and guises. And you know, we're always looking at what various startups are doing, what various scale-ups are doing, what established companies, big listed companies.
Yeah.
Everybody has an element of threat in terms of what they're doing and how it might encroach in terms of what you're doing. So I suppose there's two things about it. It's number one, definitely having awareness of what other businesses are doing in the market. But number two as well, it's having faith in yourself and keeping your head down and delivering. And, you know, are you going to spend your time worrying about somebody else, or are you going to spend your time building the most amazing product ever? So, you know, it's not becoming distracted as well by those. But, you know, there was times where, you know, I did have things, I was like, oh my God, I've just discovered this. And like, it would make you feel so low. You're like, oh my God, this is like, or is it? Or like, you know, you take a first glance and you think, this is competitive. And then you're like, actually, it's not competitive at all. So I've probably changed my opinion of what's competitive and what's not as well a little bit. But that all comes as you learn your business and your niche in the market, and you understand about their strategy, and you're thinking, actually, no, we may operate in the same sector, but we've two very different niches within that sector. So whether that's a startup or whether it's a big company. So I think it's all about just having faith in your vision and your mission, and don't get too distracted, but definitely be aware. But yeah, execute well.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, it's been awesome chatting to you. I've learned so much. Are there any sort of little tips or nuggets that you would give to the audience? Any founders that are either in the middle of their raise or thinking about raising? What sort of tips would you give them off the top of your head, like the most important things that you've learned?
Ask lots of questions. Ask lots of questions of investors, ask lots of questions of whoever you're speaking to, especially as well, find people that have got very differences of opinions on things from you, and ask them lots of questions. And like, you know, people that say, oh, well, this is going to be a problem. Oh, that's really interesting. Why do you think it is? Because your initial reaction might be like, that's not going to be a problem. I'm like, maybe they know something I don't. Maybe they've looked at it from a different slant. So continue to ask questions to get as much information as you can. I think is the really important bit. And asking questions as well of investors. How can you help? How can I tap into your audience? And if you think somebody can help, make sure you've had that conversation before they just invest as well, because you want to put it up front. Don't be too shy to ask, to say, oh, well, they're investing and I'm sure they will then introduce me into X or Y or their company. We could do some collaborations. Put it up front at the beginning so that you know if it's there or not, because there might be reasons why they're unable to do that or unwilling to do that. So make it really transparent from the outside. If you're looking for money plus something, have you had that conversation? Yeah, lots of questions.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, that's awesome. And thank you for answering all of my questions. It's been a real pleasure to have you on the show. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.